Hi, I'm Liam Dann, and this is a podcast about our relationship with money. We're not going to tell you how to get rich. We're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. In this series, I'll be talking to some interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned about it through the years. Today, I'm talking to Mary Holm, author, longtime Herald personal finance columnist, Officer of the Order of New Zealand Merit, broadcaster. There's a lot there, Mary.
Yeah, I keep quite busy actually. Yeah.
Most famous, really, overall, I suppose, just for that advice on money. So it's good to have you here talking about money today.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
I guess though, probably important to point out, you're a journalist first and foremost, not an economist, not a stockbroker or anything like that.
And not a financial advisor.
Right,
which people often think I am. Yeah, no, I'm a journo. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess you get, your feedback is just those hundreds and probably thousands now of letters from readers who are really unsure about some of the basics of money.
Yeah, yes. It's still quite shocking how many, when the share market goes down, how many of them panic. You and I are both working to try and stop that happening, but it will always happen to some extent.
So I wanted to ask, are you passionate about money? Or how is it that you've ended up in this career being an expert on money?
I'm not passionate about money. I don't think that money's all, it's absolutely not the be all and end all. And it's not. I don't spend my leisure time reading books about money. I read novels. I think, obviously having your money working well for you means you can relax and get on with the other more important things in life, actually. Yeah. I've
noticed over the years, actually, quite often your advice will include a reminder to people to actually spend and enjoy their money, especially in later years.
That's really true. I hear from, a few people in their later retirement saying they wish they'd spent more on fun in their early retirement while they still had their health. And I think that's a common problem. People get too scared to spend money. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, let me jump back right to the beginning, I guess. But do you have an earliest memory of money in your life growing up?
Nothing that leaps to mind much, except perhaps I was one of 4 kids, and we all gave one another Christmas and birthday presents. And I do remember at Christmas trying to make sure I spent the same amount on every one of my siblings, to the point where if one of them, back then it was pennies, if one of them, if I'd spent a shilling, 12 pennies on one and 10 pennies on the other, I had to go and buy a tuppenny packet of chewing gum so that they were absolutely equal.
All even. So
yes.
Were you the eldest? Or?
No, I was the third out of 4. Yeah.
And whereabouts did you grow up?
In Seatoun in Wellington.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you describe it as a sort of a sort of middle class kind of upbringing?
Yeah, very much middle class. We were, reasonably comfortable. I wasn't really ever aware of the family being short of money, so I was lucky in that way. Yeah.
I guess New Zealand in that time, everything was a little bit more even.
And people were just better off relative to the rest of the world than they are now. I think I can remember. I think people saying that we had the highest standard of living in the world back in the 50s and 60s. You wouldn't say that now. But, but there was poverty. But we didn't see it a lot. I went to high school at Wellington East Girls College, and the suburbs that fed into that, some of them were quite poor suburbs like Newtown, which is now quite a sort of upmarket, gentrified. So there were kids at high school.
But the difference, there wasn't the big difference from the top to the bottom, except maybe an overseas holiday if you were wealthier. But
there weren't that many overseas holidays in those days. It was, it was more like we went off camping and things like that. Yeah. So just to leap through the career choices and things, because you, as you say, you're not an economist, but you eventually did end up studying economics. Is that right? Yeah, and more finance actually. I ended up at the University of Chicago. Well, I was working as a journalist in Chicago, and part time did an MBA in finance, and that was So there was some economics in it, but it was mostly about investing.
So you'd already found your way to journalism in New Zealand through university, or just straight out into the workforce?
I did a bachelor's in economic history in Wellington,
right, yep.
and went to the Evening Post, the Wellington evening paper then, to see if I could get a job as a reporter, and the editor said I was overqualified.
Yeah.
They didn't like to hire bachelor's degrees then. They thought we wouldn't be able to write at an ordinary person's level.
Very much a trade in those days.
Yeah, it was. And yet, so I went and wrote for a little magazine in the government. And then when I went with my husband to America and did an MA in journalism over there, partly because I wasn't allowed to work under the visas we first went in on, and thought, what am I going to do? I'll do this journalism degree. And then having a master's in journalism over there was what you needed to get into a paper, whereas having a bachelor's was too much education in New Zealand. So it was quite different in those days.
Yeah. So you were I'm just interested in the Chicago bit, because Chicago famously has a school of economics. It's sort of the birthplace of neoliberal economics.
Milton Friedman.
All that stuff. Was that part of your training?
Yes, it was really. Yeah. I mean, I think I got brainwashed over there into thinking that the market solved all problems, And since then, I've come a long way from that way of thinking, just looking around and realising that it doesn't solve all problems. But it was an interesting, really fun environment to be in. My husband was actually a professor at the business school, and so we socialised with the other professors, and boy, some bright people and some interesting ideas. Yeah.
Well, what was the timing years-wise? Because that was probably around or coming into the big revolution around that stuff.
Yeah, it was in the late 70s, early 80s.
So it was all fermenting. That was sort of about to sort of be unleashed through the Thatcher and Reaganism.
That's right, and Rogernomics in New Zealand not long after that.
So you mentioned your husband. You sort of followed your husband to America. Was he in the finance sector, or was he?
Yeah, he was an actuary. Actually. And he wanted to do a doctorate in actuarial science, and so that's what took us. There were only 3 universities in the world where you could do that, and that's what took us off on our adventure to America, which was so different from America these days. It was, there's a whole lot that's terribly sad about America now and worrying. Yeah. It wasn't like it was wonderful then, but it was much more exciting, much more of a positive place to go than it is now. It was neat, yeah.
And so you came back to New Zealand and straight back into journalism?
Yeah, actually via Australia. Yep. We went there for 2 years, and I worked on the Australian Financial Review there.
Right.
And then came back to New Zealand to be business editor of the Auckland Sun.
Right.
Which I don't know if you even remember.
Short-lived, wasn't it?
It only lasted a year. It was started by the company that ran the Auckland Star, the New Zealand News, and, a big company around New Zealand. And the evening newspapers were looking sick already, but they took on the Herald, and we came out with the Auckland Sun, and it was pretty exciting. It was a little tabloid paper, and we had a guy off Fleet Street who was the editor, and things were
buzzing.
Pretty. Yeah, they were, and a lot of people said that our business section was a lot more interesting than the Herald business section in those days.
Back in those days, it was pretty dry stuff. The Herald, it was the stock reports and not much else.
That's right, and it was and just running press releases.
Yeah.
It was
So was this pre 87 or around 87?
It was right around then.
Yeah, which wouldn't have helped for the newspaper.
No, that's what the paper launched in. About June, I think, 87, and then in October came the crash.
Of course, yeah.
And the advertising, we were just starting to build up advertising, and it dwindled. And in the meantime, the company, New Zealand News, got taken over by Brierley's.
That's right.
And they had no patience for a paper. Taking on the Herald was a 10-year challenge or something. No one expected it to make profit straight away. And Ron Brierley and co said, blow this. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
So that was that.
It's a shame because in a lot of ways, I guess you kept going anyway, but it was such an interesting time. It would have been such an interesting time for financial journalism.
That's right.
So many terrible stories of people investing in
all those
terrible things.
Companies disappearing, Equity Corp and those sort of companies.
I mean, there was ostrich farming and Angora goats and all that sort of stuff.
There was, there was all that. You're right. I actually then then did get a job as business editor of the Auckland Star, so I stayed in the financial journalism at that point.
Yeah. And so you would have been reporting in the years after that. I mean, the crash, they talk about it affecting the psyche of New Zealanders around money and investment, perhaps worse than some other parts of the world.
Yes.
You know, it's taken a long time for New Zealanders to really start to understand, embrace personal finance and talk about investing. I mean, you've been a big part of sort of growing that. But have you noticed the change? Have you do you recall what it was like and say that those days after the crash?
Yeah, look, I think it's improved a lot. I mean, talking about the crash, I've never seen anything like the number of New Zealanders in share clubs and that before the crash in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
It was mad.
Yeah.
And everyone was like that famous story about the shoeshine boy giving Patrick Kennedy, John Kennedy's father, advice on shares, and that's when he said he's going to get out of the markets because of the shoeshine boy was in them. And it was a bit like that in New Zealand and before the crash. But the crash was in New Zealand. Basically, people were borrowing to invest, and they were investing in companies that were borrowing to invest.
Yeah.
And so that's why things were so terrible when the crash came in New Zealand. It was ghastly. And that is still echoing in people of my generation still staying out of shares, although gradually inching back. But I think that KiwiSaver has done a huge amount to get people to understand the markets more.
And while people are dealing with a bit of a crash, a bear market now, we don't have that sort of people weren't leveraged up, they weren't borrowing into the market. So I guess
I don't think so.
Mostly they should be able to sustain it.
Yes. We don't know how many people are borrowing to invest in say, Sharesies or
That's
Invest
true.
Now, do we?
Yeah.
But you don't get the impression that it's happening a lot.
The lenders are more cautious.
Yeah, that's true.
But it certainly did push, push a lot of Kiwis back towards property. I guess property's always been an investment, but it's in terms of shaping New Zealand's economy, that obsession with property seems to have been driven a bit for your generation, I guess, after the crash. Yeah,
look, I think because those are the two sort of long-term big growth types of assets, the shares and the property, aren't they? There's all these other, gold and now crypto, etc. But those are the main two where you get lots of long-term growth. And so, yes, New Zealanders are pretty silly about property, aren't they? I mean, yeah.
When you get a lot of letters, a lot of questions. Are there other questions that is there a couple of questions that stand out as the ones that you are most asked?
These days it's, oh God, what's happening to my KiwiSaver fund?
Yeah.
And that also in 2020, of course, when we had the COVID plunge that came right very fast. Part of the trouble with KiwiSaver is that KiwiSaver started in 2007 and there was the global financial crisis, but a lot of people weren't even in KiwiSaver yet, or they had so little in there that they weren't really all that aware of what was happening. And since then, the markets have just grown and grown and grown with hardly any downturns at all. And New Zealanders have just sort of thought that was the norm, unfortunately.
Now they have to deal with the ugly side of it.
Yes.
But I mean, you've been an advocate. I know there was with Brian Gaynor, there was the long running passive active thing, but you've sort of been with Warren Buffett on this. That you get in the market, you can just stay there, track the market effectively. Passive funds will eventually win. Yeah,
although Buffett himself, of course, is not a passive investor.
No, he talks about being about tracking the market or tracking the S&P, but he himself is very
well. He is. I mean, he's one of the world's best share choosers, obviously.
Yeah.
But he says he thinks for most people, including his wife after he dies, should just get into passive.
Yeah.
And the research kind of keeps on showing that it's a pretty good way to do it.
I guess you can look at a graph for the S&P 500 or something across 100 years or something, and it just unless society is going to hell in a handbasket, in which case we're all done for.
Yes.
It'll be back.
Yeah. Oh God, yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yes. This is just another little blip. Yes.
Yeah. when you look at, Kiwis and financial literacy and talking about money, obviously, everybody is concerned about inequality in New Zealand society.
Yes.
Some people seem to even from quite, poor or tough backgrounds to start with, seem to get ahead, and others just don't. Is there something around money that you've observed that makes a difference around, getting ahead financially?
Yeah, look, I ponder that and I don't know. I mean, I think the people who come from a really poor background and do well, there's an element of luck in there.
Yeah.
There's an element of willing to take a risk, but some people take a risk and crash horribly, and some do really well, and we only hear about the ones who do really well.
It's sort of evolutionary, isn't it? It's like the success stories rise, and
that's right. And there are a lot of people who are just too scared, really, to take enough risk with money, I think. But it is a huge worry, there's growing inequality, and I've been sort of reading a little bit lately about universal basic income.
Things like that,
that Gareth Morgan was pushing. But, it's been tried around the world in different places, and the immediate objections aren't really valid. And I just wonder if we could do something like that in New Zealand. Yeah.
I mean, that is a long way. You're coming back round to talking about going through the Chicago School of Economics. It's a long way from that, that, I guess, the neoliberal revolution of the late 70s and early 80s. But things do seem to have shifted. I mean, I know you say you personally have, but do you think there are some fundamental rules there that still stand around the economics?
Not quite sure what you're getting at.
Well, I guess, like some people will say the market stuff is almost like a scientific fact that, and then there's other people will say, like, it's all a human construct and all that sort of stuff. But
well, there's been a lot of interesting research, actually quite a lot of it at the University of Chicago, on behavioural economics and how the way people behave gets in the way of doing things that are sort of optimally efficient. And so that certainly modified the sort of Milton Friedman school of thought a lot, I think, because people realise that
people just aren't, markets can't be rational if people aren't rational.
That's right.
And maybe a few of the crashes we've been through have highlighted, some of the flaws in markets. GFC certainly shifted thinking about, that idea that markets were infallible because it was just such a disaster, I guess.
And the idea that there needs to be more government regulation is sort of swinging back into fashion, I think, with the Financial Markets Authority and all of the stuff that's brought, and all of the monitoring of KiwiSaver and so on, because the FMA realises that if somebody, it was revealed that somebody had run off to South America with everybody's KiwiSaver money, that would be a disaster.
Were you involved in the FMA formation?
I was
a founding board member. Or?
That's right.
I'm stretching my memory a little bit. But, So how did they approach you on that?
It was some of the government officials who I'd sort of just got to know a bit. Said, well, we need some more sort of ordinary investor or consumer's voice on the board. Do you want to do it? And I thought, this would be interesting. And so it was.
Absorb all the thoughts and questions you absorbed through your readers. And
I feel very grateful to the readers that send in the letters. I mean, it's only maybe a third of them or less that get into the column these days.
Wow,
but I get a real feel for what people out there are worrying about and thinking about, and without that I wouldn't know nearly as much as I do. It's great.
Have you noticed that you get a new generation coming through? For years my peers weren't interested in what I did, and then suddenly after 40, getting closer to 50, I've noticed that people I know are paying attention to what I do for a job, and it's because they've sort of come into this zone where they start to care a bit more about personal finance, basically.
Yeah, I suppose the young ones are getting right into the online platforms and that kind of thing now too, and the crypto, which is we've got mixed feelings about that, and not quite sure about it, but it is getting them interested in money in a different way. on the other hand, they're getting very depressed about being unable to save enough to buy a house.
Which is perhaps why they're doing it. But
yes, that's right.
But I mean, I feel like, well, you know, again, I'm nervous about crypto and stuff like that, and people probably just becoming share traders or currency traders and things.
Yes.
But you sort of feel like, well, if they're starting with a little bit of money and they're not borrowing, you know, they may lose some money, but they're going to learn, aren't they? I mean,
absolutely.
if they keep doing it for 15, 20 years, odds are they will be, you know, they'll end up with some sort
doing
of
quite well.
Yeah, sophisticated in their thinking about money.
Yeah, I mean, that's the time of your life to make those mistakes. I was telling you before about me with the foreign exchange. We were young then, and, you know, you learn... You, there's nothing like having it happen to you.
That's
learn.
right. Your parents can tell you 100 times something.
Yeah, quite.
Okay, look, just to finish up, I guess this is a really a tough question, but if you were in charge of things, running the government, all that sort of stuff, is there something that a policy you'd like to see that might shift the dial a bit on the inequality or help more people get to a sort of level of financial literacy?
A couple of thoughts on that. I mean, one is the universal basic income. I'd love to see that looked at more seriously in New Zealand. I reckon we could do some good stuff with it. I'd also love to see beneficiaries in KiwiSaver and the government perhaps putting in 1% of their benefit into KiwiSaver. I mean, give them a 1% benefit rise. I'm not saying cut the benefit, but just get those people in there, because they can learn and they can be encouraged and they can feel some hope in their future. And I just think something like that could be really exciting. And New Zealand's the kind of country that can do that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I guess that is, I mean, you talked about not really being passionate about making money for its own sake, but for people, it's about financial security. It's about security in their life, isn't it? Having some safety and comfort in your life, just by having a bit of a buffer there. Yeah,
and, you know, being able to feed and house your children well and all of that, you know, there's no doubt that at that level, money's terribly important. And the more that we can help those people and, you know, both understand money and just have more money, really, the better we all will be. Yeah.
Look, that's great, Mary. We will leave it there. Thank you for coming and chatting and sharing some stories.
Thanks, Liam. It's been fun.
And thank you for listening. If you've got feedback, drop me a line, liam.dan@nzherald.co.nz. And if you want to hear more of these, please subscribe at iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.